morning. This is Dr. Annie Clark with the Pennsylvania Coalition of Public Charter Schools and our show, Growing Up Charter. Today, I am joined by a friend and also a community leader, Pearl Wise. She is the York chapter coordinator for crime survivors for safety and justice. And I actually went through this training myself years ago and met Pearl there, and I just learned so much from Pearl and everyone else. So, Pearl, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Awesome. And can you just tell us a little bit about your story, if you don't mind?
Yes. In 2018, July 21st, my son, who was 25 years old at the time, Chad Merrill, had been shot and killed by a racist drunk at the Red Rose Bar in Pelham, PA. He was standing at the end of the bar talking to his friend. James Saylor came into the bar and started throwing racial remarks at Jarrell. The only thing my son said was he put his arm on Jarrell's back and told him to ignore the guy. He was drunk. After a few minutes, they escorted James Saylor out the front door, but they did not follow him to his vehicle. So he's out in the parking lot trying to find his truck, and he finally finds it. And before he gets in his truck, he pulls a gun out of his front pants and shoots at the building. He gets in his truck and he's getting ready to leave. Now they're
Oh, you muted yourself, Pearl.
waiting for somebody to pick up. At that point in time, my son decided he was going to walk outside to his truck. Jarrell told him and two owners at the bar that they needed to make sure he left because he could have a hate in his eyes. Well, Chad told Jarrell he was just going out to his truck. He'd be right back. Well, as Chad's walking out the door and going down the ramp, James Saylor seen him coming out. He backs his truck out, backs up into his parking spot, pulls forward, and you can see on video he's putting his window down. He says something to my son. He takes one step forward and he shoots him right in the middle of the chest. Then he takes off and goes away. He hits the Uber driver as he's going. My son never had a chance and went right through his chest out the back. The Uber driver was afraid he was next. James Saylor has been caught and he is in jail for the rest of his life with no parole. My son, 25 years old, left behind a 5-month-old baby. And then that baby's mama was a one-night stand and she overdosed in 2020. So I am raising my grandson, me and my husband alone.
It's just such a tragic story, and every time I hear it, it still makes me so sad because I know that you have been just through so much, you and your family, so unexpected, just so undeserved. It's just terrible. How did that lead you to this work that you're doing now that has helped thousands and thousands of people in York and beyond York?
Well, in April of 2019, Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice heard my story. They invited me to California, what was called Survivors Speak. So me and my oldest son went. It was a 4-day trip. And to walk into a room of 500 to 700 people, all affected by crime, I can't explain the feeling or the love that was in that room. It was just breathtaking. We spent the 4 days there eating. We had 3 square meals a day. We would break out into sessions and tell our stories, but they had Reiki, they had massages. It was all about victims telling their stories to what help they did or did not receive and just healing. The last day we marched to the state capitol, which was amazing. And we passed some bills. That's what Crime Survivors does, is they hear what victims did not get help with, so then they go in, they try to change the laws to help victims. Here in Pennsylvania, we got the law changed for you only have 2 years to file for compensation with the Office of Victims Advocate. We got that changed to 5 years
Great.
because 2 years is not enough. And the other one was with domestic violence. The landlord has to change their locks if they request it. He cannot just evict them. And they have 72 hours to report the crime, which is not enough time if you're being victimized.
Right.
So we got that extended.
Uh,
Every year we will have a Survivors Speak 20, whatever year, and we will be changing more bills and more policies.
Absolutely. I was fortunate enough to meet
Um,
you at the Capitol this past year, um, with other, can you tell me a little bit about that day when I saw you at the Capitol here in Harrisburg? What were you doing? What was the organization doing?
okay, well, the organization bused us all to Harrisburg, and I was speaking to legislators and telling my story and to how important it was to have these bills in place. We also look into building trauma centers. So we were discussing trauma centers with the legislator. And then we went to the front of the Capitol steps and we told our stories, and we just celebrated for the fact that we got these bills changed. Afterwards, we went to the courtyard out back and we basically just had a little celebration with all crime survivors. There was probably over 200 of us that came from Pennsylvania.
Yes,
So it was exciting. It was exhilarating to know that my voice is making a change.
absolutely. Absolutely. I was so moved by, you all being at the Capitol, and I got to meet, other people that you were friends with and who've also survived crime, and it's always meaningful to hear the stories. I was thinking about one of the events that we had at Lincoln, which was this former school that I worked at. I think you still have your meetings there and events there. We had you guys having a meeting in the lobby, and upstairs at the same time, we had a gentleman who was teaching about hydroponics. I invited him down because we had food downstairs. We didn't have food upstairs. But once he got down there, he shared his own experience that he had just recently had on being a victim of crime. And if you hadn't been there that day, I don't think he would have ever shared that. And it was really bothering him. Like, I mean, it was really holding him back and making him feel nervous and scared and unsure. And that just wasn't his personality. And so I saw in that moment how people really need a place to share their story. Because if they don't have a place, a lot of times they don't share their story. Have you found that to be true? And how do you keep bringing more people in to tell their story?
Okay, yes, that's true because me, myself, I never had the voice. I never would stand up in front of people and talk. But from the day my son was killed, I guess he gave me the courage. Um, it's healing for me because when you go through a trauma like this, everybody's there for you. And then, of course, they got their own lives and they go off. So then you feel totally alone. So this has helped me a lot. I get to stand up, I get to talk about my son. And even though it's a tragedy, I still feel good because I can talk about him and I tell his story. Every time I tell his story, I gain more strength within myself. Um, it's not just about speaking and changing laws, but being able to speak and tell your trauma and your experience is healing because you're releasing it. So yes, I thank crime survivors for getting me involved because it goes beyond just that. There's somebody in this organization that is going through the same thing you have. So it's also healing that you can reach out and talk to others who have experienced the same thing you have. And you learn what they're doing to cope and how they're surviving.
Yes,
So it's very therapeutic as well as a good cause.
absolutely. When we had heard about the trauma centers, when we had went through that training there on George Street, you were there, I was there, Miss Queen of Washington was there, several other people were there. We heard about those trauma centers that was prior to the pandemic. And then when we started going through the COVID-19 pandemic at Lincoln, we were able to use space. We called it a wellness center just because there is a lot of trauma in our community. So we wanted to have more of a positive thing. But that information that we received that day really helped us understand that everyone, almost everyone you meet has had a trauma, not maybe to the extreme of your situation, which is the most extreme, losing a child. Um, but almost everybody's had a trauma and they're carrying that with them and they need support that goes beyond, you're right, that initial conversation, oh, I feel terrible for you, and then what? So how does crime survivors sort of stay with someone who's had a trauma and help them, support them beyond just that first few weeks?
We keep in touch. I try to do monthly calls with my members just to check in on them, see how they're doing. We will have monthly meetings. They have Crime Survivors has every Thursday night at 7 o'clock. They have a healing space that you can sign on to. Everything's confidential. It doesn't go further than that group, that meeting. And we just talk. We try and find ways maybe to help us with our trauma, self-care. But that's every Thursday. They do have during Crime Victims Week, we do a whole thing the whole week online of different sections, and we do yoga over Zoom and meditation and just to help people to heal. We just let people know we are there for them no matter what. If you've got a problem and you just want somebody to talk to, you can pick up the phone and call me anytime.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I'm sorry that I did not realize about your losing your grandson's mother. I didn't realize that, so I apologize for that. How is it going? I know that you're great with your grandson. I've seen you with him and your husband, so I know that part of it is great. But how is that going? Because a lot of our students have lost a family member and they're growing up. So if you were talking to other parents, which could be watching this, or what would you say to them? Because you have a situation where you have a grandson who's lost both parents. How are you handling that, or will handle that conversation?
Well, we've already had that conversation as far, I mean, he's only going to be 5, so he's 4 now. So you got to kind of pick and choose how you tell a little one like that. He has always known who his daddy was. I have, my son was cremated, so I got a great big picture of him up on the wall with his ashes behind it. So when he was 5 months old, before his daddy got killed, he knew who his daddy was. He'd stare at him all the time the minute he walked in the door. And then after my son was killed, any man that would have a little goatee and wear a baseball cap, he'd cling to. And he did that probably for about a year. So I know he had a memory of his daddy. So he knows who his daddy is. He does not know mom because the only thing I know mom as is a drug addict. And so I don't know her any other way than that because I met her. It was 3 weeks before they had the baby. My son was afraid to tell me that he was having a child. So I basically told him that daddy's up in heaven and he always goes outside and looks up at the sky. But I told him a bad man came and hurt his daddy and killed him. So I'm not so sure that was a good way to explain it to him because now he likes to talk a lot about a bad guy. There's a bad guy coming, Nan, or, and I try to ensure him that the doors are always locked and I wouldn't let anything happen to him. That's pretty much all I told him at this point. I didn't give him any other details. I'm sure probably when he gets older, like 13 or so, then, I'll give him more details. I have all the news articles and so forth. But not only was his daddy shot and killed, his daddy also received 2 awards for his bravery. One was from Pennsylvania Harrisburg, public relations. They gave me a plaque to honor Chad for his bravery. And then the other one was from the 4 chaplains.
Wow.
And I don't know if anybody's familiar with the 4 chaplains. Do you know about them?
I know the name, but I don't really understand exactly what they do. So any explanation would be helpful for all of us, I'm sure.
Okay, well, the 4 chaplains organization was, I can't remember the year, but they were on a Navy ship. They were Navy, men. They were on a ship and the ship started going down. These 4 chaplains saved the members on the ship, but they went down with the ship and did not survive. So every year they have a memorial for them. But they honored Chad too for sacrificing himself to protect his friend and for his bravery.
Yeah,
So I was very honored to receive those 2 awards.
absolutely.
My son would not have, my son used to write all the time because I always told him, write down your feelings. And well, he liked to do rap a lot and write songs. Well, he had put in those writings that he wanted to be famous one day. Well, even though he's not here to recognize it, on that day and the week after, he became famous. I mean, I received messages and cards from people all over the world. I even had a young man who lived in Idaho, and he sent me an email and told me that Chad was the king. He had said that he lived here and went to the same school, and he was always picked on the bus, and Chad always stood up for him.
Oh,
So that was good to hear.
yes. So that was just
So,
heart. His heart was a protector. He was always a
yeah,
protector.
yes, he never liked fighting. He always tried to get people together. Even when he walked out that bar the night, I'm sure he had no fear when James Saylor pulled up to him.
Right,
Because in the video, I could see him taking one step towards him to listen to what he was going to say. I'm not sure what he said to him, but then you can see my son backing away when he's seen the gun.
right.
But he wasn't a mean person. He always wanted to try and keep peace between people. So, I'm very proud of the boy I raised.
Yes.
Sometimes you wonder if you're doing a good job or not, but I'm very proud of how he had turned out.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I agree. And I've seen your other children and your other son and I've seen your grandson and I definitely know that you were doing a good job with your children,
Thank you.
your grandchildren. I just think it's just um I saw this a few years ago on an Oprah show that a family had lost their child. The child was pretty young and the family just could not get over it. And the guy there said this has been a ripple. look how many people your child, touched, unfortunately, by passing away and living and passing away, and they're still touching people. They'll always be touching people. And I think, it's hard to lose anyone, and no mother wants to hear another mother has lost their child, because it's so, all of us have no idea exactly how you feel, and yet we can imagine how you feel. Um, but he has rippled. I mean, this was 2018, and now we're in 2023. And this, and your story, your son's story, is so relevant today. It was relevant then, it's relevant today, and it will continue to be, because you love him and he's your child. And it did change our community for the better, and I can see that in the work that you've done, and how this wasn't available in York prior to you being that chair. And so now I've seen personally myself how many people it has impacted, and I'm sure there's lots of people it's impacted that I don't know, but it is amazing to see that. I'm sorry it happened the way it did, but I'm proud of the work that you've done and grateful for it.
Well, thank you. Yes. Like I said, this is my survivor. I mean, it gives me a purpose. And that's one thing when you lose a child or any trauma, you feel so alone and you just don't understand. I mean, I still, almost 5 years later, am still having a hard time. I have my days. His birthday's coming up. Soon it'll be July again. Um, I just make sure I pick and choose my time to grieve because I don't want to do it around my grandson. He is so happy. He's wonderful. He keeps me going. If it wouldn't be for him waking me up every day, I'm not sure I would. But yeah, you just got to think of it that way. Some days I'm just in bed and I can't do nothing, and it's like, don't talk to me. And then other days I'm feeling great and I know my purpose and what I got to do. So it's just a matter of time. I do not believe time heals all wounds, but it does make it easier a little bit.
I do agree with you about that. Some traumas you will never completely get over because they're that devastating. But I like that you said you give yourself permission to grieve. And I think that's really helpful, because I know for sure, I don't know how many people have said that, have had any kind of loss, and they say, oh, people want us to get over it. Like, people want us to be okay. It's almost like, oh, you should be over that by now. And truthfully, some things you will never get over. But I guess learning how to live with them is, critical, because you want to still feel joy, and you have this little baby grandson who's joyful, too, and you want to be able to experience that. What advice do you give other mothers, or anyone who is grieving, and maybe they have people saying to them, hey, you should get over this sooner? Like, what could you say to them?
Well, first of all, there is no timeline for somebody to grieve. Everybody is individual, and no matter what the trauma is, there's no time limit. And trauma is one of those things that you could be fine and boom, it sneaks up on you. Something happens, reminds you, takes you back. Um, I was in a mentally abusive relationship from my first marriage, and that was about 15 years ago. But still, some of those triggers still come back to me. Oh, I'm out at the grocery store too long. I got to hurry up and get home or I'll be in trouble. Those kind of things. So it never leaves you, but it does get a little easier to cope with. The mind is a terrible thing. And if you don't talk to somebody, it'll eat you away. And I've learned that. You do, whether it's a counselor, a therapist, or just a friend or a stranger. I technically have found more compassion from strangers, like meeting you at Queena. You know, you get more compassion sometimes from strangers because your family members don't know what to say to you or how to act around you. But yeah, one day at a time, 1 second at a time. It's whatever you feel comfortable with at a time. But I recommend that they do reach out, whether it's a friend or a stranger, to be able to talk. Otherwise, it all builds up inside you until it explodes.
I love that. It's very good advice. A lot of the individuals who watch our show are other school leaders. And so there have, our smallest charter school has 100 students. Our largest charter school has 23,000 students. So it's a
Wow.
wide range there. But our school leaders all want the best for their students. What is some information you can provide to them, either about the crime survivors for safety and justice, or even the trauma centers that have been placed in schools?
Trauma centers, we do not have enough of. And that's sorry to say, because then that tells you how much crime's going on. But you think about it. Here I am, a grandmother, and I've been traumatized. But now I have a child, and that child knows what's happened. Say their brother or their sister or their mom and dad was shot and killed. Who's helping them? Because, all of a sudden that person was there, now they're gone. Who's helping them understand?
Right.
Mom or dad's going through their trauma. They don't understand. So that poor child's kind of left there knowing, okay, my dad was here and now he's gone. I'm told he's dead. Most young children don't know what that word means or understand it.
Yeah.
So more trauma centers needs to help them, to help, who's helping them to get through and cope.
Yes.
So the trauma centers crime survivors put in place is like I don't want to say it this way, but it's like your one stop. You can walk into that trauma center, whatever your issue is, they will give you the resources to get you the help you need.
Yes.
So, and talking about it, I've come to realize you need to talk and express your feelings about it. Otherwise, it's going to eat you up inside. And you're just going to go into a deeper, darker place.
Yes.
So, talking, expressing yourself.
Yes.
I know that has helped me a lot because, like I said, the mind just goes and you start thinking all these things. And so, yeah, the trauma centers and these children do need somebody to be able to talk to understand what has happened. The
Yes.
year my son was killed, there was 18 other mothers that lost a child that year. And each year, those numbers are not getting any better.
Yes.
So you think, who's out there helping
Mm.
these victims to get the help they need? So that's what crime survivors looks forward to, is we need to get people who are traumatized the help. Because if not, the cycles of crime continue.
Yes.
If you don't get help.
Yes. You're absolutely right. It does continue. This conversation has been just, I just think so helpful to me. It keeps it in my forefront, talking to you about, we have to keep thinking about that, what's best for our students in our schools. And schools, normally are happy places, but we have to remember we have sad children in happy places, and not to ignore their sadness or to say, oh, just get over it, because if an adult can't process it, there's no chance a child's going to process it either, because they're
That's right.
don't have the experience. So this has been so helpful. I hope that you would come on and speak to us again, just
For
because,
sure.
especially right before we get ready for What month do you celebrate or recognize crime survivors in Pennsylvania? What month is that?
It's in April and it's around, off the top of my head, it's like the 23rd, 24th it starts, Crime Victims Week. And like I said, we not only go to the state capitol and do all that, but we also have a week-long different kinds of events online. We have different trauma speakers that come in. I mean, every day is something different. And it's not just speaking. Like I said, they'll do the Reiki or the, you know, do yoga, meditation online. You can sit there. They also teach you coping skills or give you the information to get the help. Another thing with crime survivors that they've done is they connected with BetterHelp. Every member, if they need it, they can get 3 months of free counseling.
Wow.
Um, yeah, Crime Survivors puts that out there. And I personally have used it. And my therapist, I thought she was wonderful. I wish I could have still kept seeing her, but no, they give you 3 months and you can talk to them as often as you want. If you need to talk to a therapist every day, it's covered.
Wow.
So that also gives those that can't afford or don't have the medical, ability to get the help, they can get at least 3 months of that to help some healing.
Wow, that's great. I'm going to share the website on our social media so that people can reach out to you or to crime survivors to find additional information. So this was so beneficial today. Thank you so much, Pearl.
Thank you. And if you would like, you can also put my phone number down and my name,
Okay, great.
because if somebody just wants to call me and talk to me about it, or even if they just want to talk and vent to somebody, I'm here to listen. I might not have all the answers, but I can listen.
I love that so much. Thank you so much, Pearl. And we'll look forward to talking to you again.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.